Okay, so welcome back, everyone. We are going to get started with our next step of the Holistic Psychology Workshop, starting with step 4, accountability yields empowerment.
We're halfway there now, and this helps us to remove the victim mindset. So this is where we're going to shake things up just a bit. We've already covered a part of this topic, but we barely scratched the surface.
So, as we all know, Winston Churchill, one thing he stated is that the price for greatness is responsibility. Now, we mean responsibility in the sense of accountability, being responsible for ourselves. So as we each work toward becoming higher performing individuals to reach our full potential, the tools in this stage is imperative and non-negotiable. So by looking at how we are creating our reality now and can begin to create the reality we desire is the first key to personal success. Sounds simple enough, although I think we all know better that it's not. So this could rattle a few things, but it's all in good intent.
So have you ever heard the expression that you are responsible for everything that happens in life? Chances are you have, because our thoughts, we know, create a reality, which has the most influence in forming our programming. And some may wrestle with the statement that we are the motherboard to all of our reality in which our thoughts and behaviors are creating. However, our brains are hardwired to focus through the negativity bias where we may filter just the negative points or facts. And anywhere that we can continue to point blame in our life instead of seeing where we're responsible for it. But I can guarantee you that in any way that you may be feeling powerless and wanting to place blame, you may have unconsciously put yourself at the mercy of life and feeling victimized instead of learning how to be accountable, or better yet, own your own power. So you were likely a victim of circumstance and then formed a recurring pattern. So we're not condoning the poor behaviors of others. However, we're no longer needing to punish ourselves from the past events with hurt and resentment. So this step will guide us to feel empowered through course correcting, even if it implies no longer allowing the injustices from others.
We're also going to discuss with a few examples, although we must first learn how to distinguish the difference between acting from our ego and acting from our intuition. So if we often feel that others do something frequently to us, maybe treating us poorly, taking advantage of us, then this pattern occurs based on an internal belief or from a past event that was conditioned in our programming. So there's also a way to use the mirror technique and realize that it may be getting our attention for a reason. We may be lacking certain boundaries. So maybe something that we're doing to elicit a certain type of response and behavior from others. So perhaps we're also guilty of it in one form or another, or allowing it and are not fully aware of it. So the mirror technique will help us to become a little bit more aware as well as accountable, so that we know how we can course correct. So our thoughts are projected and will return to us by affecting the conditions in our lives. Our thoughts are creating our reality, which ultimately contributes to our circumstances. We learned these thinking patterns and these behavioral and belief systems, like behavioral patterns and belief systems somewhere, which is why we often feel inclined to blame the source of a problem. However, we can change our thinking patterns, and it's possible to successfully operate from better thinking habits and form new beliefs.
So we must align our thoughts to the circumstances that we want to create and transform our conditions. So adopt the belief that it is easy for me to improve my thought patterns. There's a powerful intelligence within all of us that is responding to our thoughts and words. We can choose to speak and think consciously to improve our outcomes. So it's when we reestablish a new way of thinking that we can train our minds. And because we are intelligent beings, which means we have the intelligence and power within us to act rather than react, or even be acted upon in our circumstances, it makes it possible to transform the conditions in our lives, even past experiences and hurts. And being self-governing is to be independent-minded and proactively do all we can to improve and conquer our circumstances. We are all given equal challenges and trials in life in accordance to our individual capacity that maturity also allows.
Every day, we all witness by reading, watching, or learning the number of people who experience pain, tragedy, or suffering somewhere in the world and in our own personal lives. And contrary to what we may think, our painful experiences, as hard and difficult as they may be, they're also not necessarily unique. And just from a professional standpoint, I still have yet to meet an individual who does not possess unique circumstances or special limitations, which does not mean that, we're not special in our own, unique in our own way, right? But that we're not the only ones that possess limitations. So sometimes it's just good to broaden our horizons and realize that a lot of people have unique circumstances.
Yeah, so even though suffering unfortunately may not be unique to anyone, it's how we choose to respond to our challenges and personal circumstances that is unique. So just consider for a moment how you are responding to circumstances that you would define as positive or good in your life. And is it any different than how you could be responding to any limiting conditions? What are you doing differently? How can you find something that you value from your limited circumstance? We all know that our conditions are underscored by a mindset of either scarcity or prosperity thinking. So let's use some psychotherapy questions to assist us with this step. This would be a good time to get out our P.A.N.A.C.E.A workbook or notepad. So if you're ready, name 2 things that you could have done better to prevent your presenting problem from occurring. So if your presenting problem is related to something uncontrollable, such as someone passing, such as a death and the passing of a loved one, then modify this question to your response related to the presenting problem if you can. Such as, how can you respond differently to any pain or anything that feels trapped? Are there more emotions that need to be released, for instance? And referring to the idiom, if lessons are repeated until they are learned, then what have you learned in order to change this belief or negative pattern? And what could you do to improve your relationship with the presenting problem, whether it's related to your health, career, finances, relationships, or a particular individual, education, and so forth? What is the ideal outcome? What need or emotion feels perhaps repressed that needs to be vocalized or even released?
Taking accountability for the conditions we've created in our life takes us from a victim mindset to an empowering one and puts us back into the driver's seat. So if we can shift our focus to the growing power that comes from these painful events, we can minimize and shorten the period of our pain and suffering, which will also avert us from forming long-standing grievances. Wisdom requires us to be aware of our weaknesses. We will never be given greater challenges than we can bear, which means that each of us has the power to overcome our present circumstances in our life, and that our weaknesses are no greater than our strengths. So this can be very empowering. And if you have not been able to change the negative circumstances in your life, then be patient and tell yourself that you're now acquiring the knowledge and the skills to overcome these life lessons, and that you're experiencing a deeper level of growth as a result of it. Sometimes you just need to be the one to initiate change by being willing to accept help. So be ready and willing when it comes, and do not allow pride to interfere, because pride is only a cover-up for shame. And each of us can use a lending hand and a helping hand once in a while.
And empowerment comes via taking accountability. we may not be able to control the genetic cards we have been dealt, but we can learn how to play a winning hand. So how can we be the change that we wish to see and gain our power back? So in a question with your notebooks, how can you put the power back in your hands and take personal accountability, whether it's breaking a pattern or codependency pattern if necessary? I believe it's often related to a thought pattern. Can you change a thought, which is generally contrary to what the thought is? And what new action step can you take to create what you want?
So do not take for granted the opportunity to learn about yourself and see where there is need for improvement, because experience is our greatest teacher. So take all feedback that comes to you as a positive indicator to gauge what changes you're being prompted to make. And try to take it a step further and be grateful for the opportunity. These changes will only improve your life and provide you with feedback where positive adjustments can be made. By looking at how we are contributing to our reality now, we can then begin to create the reality we desire as a vital key to our personal success. By choosing to no longer identify as the victim, we can begin to step into empowering mindsets and find emotional freedom to ensure we're generating the results that we desire.
Okay, so look at what we did to contribute to any conflict in our life and what we could have done better. Okay, and where did we mistreat a person, a situation, or even perhaps ourselves? Where did we err in our beliefs or perceptions? Are we operating in any way out of integrity? Or have we allowed others to mistreat us, such as use and abuse, so that we can learn how to self-adjust, such as no longer allowing it? If there's a specific scenario or past experience that comes to mind, write that down. And it's when we examine these questions that we can begin to consciously choose new experiences based from personal experiences versus default thinking. So personal responsibility is taking accountability for the outcomes, the creations, as well as the miscreations in our life. This is one of the first and foremost steps to personal mastery.
And people are often well-intended, whether it may appear that way or not. However, when the fundamental human need is to love and be loved, our actions and behaviors will often reflect whether our desire is to feel love, or to feel loved, or to express love. So with that in mind, ask yourself, are your intentions generally well-meaning? And if so, then is it possible that the intentions of others might be also?
And because a desire is to always love or be loved, we have to recognize that oftentimes if we feel devoid of love, we may act from need instead of from a state of love. And this is why it is essential to first come from self-love to ensure we're not acting out of a state of need, which will create more lack and scarcity, versus embodying love, which is also abundance. Therefore, when we ask for support when it is desired, it can be derived from a state of self-love by allowing ourselves to receive support when necessary.
Okay, so we're going to discuss belief creations, and this is pretty advanced. So what belief has caused negative patterns in your life or in your primary relationships, such as attracting or drawing these repetitive experiences to you? So if you have any repetitive experiences and you notice any kind of patterns that are unhealthy, negative, unwanted, try to look at any beliefs that may have caused to these patterns in your life, and what may be causing or attracting you to draw these repetitive experiences to you. And similarly, what beliefs are drawing you to certain people and experiences? Can you find a correlation or common theme in your patterns?
And bear in mind, again, this could often be epigenetic. It could be something that was a learned behavior from either of your parents or from your upbringing that is now in your programming. And if that's the case, again, going back to the question, what change would you want to see?
Sometimes it's just a matter of changing our belief system, which is what we're working on addressing. So in what ways can we become more accountable for our belief? And it could just mean that we had a perception about some kind of experience that formed a belief in our mind. And that's what we continue to experience. And that can even be static beliefs, such as our own perceptions and how we continue to choose to view a certain person, situation, event, or other subjects. Okay, so now name 2 things that you have done to contribute to the presenting problem. For instance, if you experienced a loss of a job or continue to experience job instability, has there been an error in the way you think, perform, or interact with others? Such as, is there a limiting belief around job or job security? If you experienced a loss or frequently experience losses in partnerships, such as business, marital, or social, did you err in the way that you communicated or behaved that you may have contributed to the problem? And loss meaning, not meaning passing on, the passing on of loved ones. And are you unintentionally or unconsciously sabotaging the relationship? Because a lot of times when we have a lot of people come in and go, we may be the ones sabotaging the relationship unintentionally.
Whether it's a fear or a limiting belief, such as fear of abandonment, which can be very common.
And if you continue to experience health challenges, are you eating a well-balanced diet, engaging in positive mental health practices, and living a healthy lifestyle? Or does this area of your life need improvement and other adjustments?
Just as an example. So if lessons are repeated until they are learned, then what have you learned in order to change this negative pattern? What can you do to improve your relationship with the presenting problem? Again, whether it's related to your health, career, finances, relationships, and so forth. So if you can, take a moment to provide an ideal scenario. What new belief can you adopt to overcome the limiting belief or fear of your pattern? Or how can you transform the relationship with the presenting problem?
What impact does it have on me or others? And what is the payoff for behaving this way? So for example, sometimes the pride of wanting to be right, receiving the acceptance, approval, acknowledgement, recognition, or validation of others is often something that would be considered a psychological payoff or an emotional payoff. And can we eliminate our dependency on the reward or psychological payoff? How can we receive a payoff that mutually benefits all parties or anyone that is involved?
And similarly, how can you be the solution or change that you wish to see? So in this step, if you can, write out the worst case scenario of your fear and a contingency plan to overcome the fear. So take a moment to either state or write out this fear and what you plan to do to overcome the fear. This step is really important because it helps us to mitigate the fear by feeling prepared and taking our minds through the process so that we don't necessarily have to experience the fear, but we can confront it by having that contingency plan in place. So now write down the best case scenario. How can you plan to be proactive to generate a better scenario? And if you can, list more than one step. So this helps us to, again, take matters into our own hands so that we don't feel powerless to any circumstances, but we can feel more empowered, where we once maybe felt like the victim or as if circumstances were outside of our control. Okay, folks, next week we will cover step 5, which is C, compassion and empathy heals relationships. So lastly, what insights or value did you gain from this module? Did you make any new connections? If you can, let's share this and any questions that you may have in our live Q&A.
Thanks for attending this module for Accountability Yields Empowerment. So we hope this was very valuable for you today.